Hello everybody, my name is Laura and you're watching the Beanbird 2 channel where we talk about testimonies and the goodness of God. And today I want to tell you a testimony in my life of a time when we needed a vehicle and God came through. So usually in my family, even growing up, my parents would buy a car brand new and they would drive it for 15 to 20 years whenever the car became just basically dead. And then they would take it to the junkyard and then they would buy another new car. And that made a lot of sense to me. I mean, if you can afford to do the initial new car cost, it does end up to be a good value if you can drive a car 15 to 20 years and you know its history. And so that's always kind of the plan I wanted to do as I grew up. So my husband and I initially, we couldn't afford to buy a new car, so we ended up doing a lease. And we had a lease of a Dodge Caravan that we did for 2 years. And then when the lease was up, we ended up buying out our lease so that we owned the vehicle. So we had the Dodge Caravan for 12 years. And in my mind, it still had a lot of life in it. It was just at the 100,000 mile mark after 12 years because we were low mileage drivers. And I knew we could drive it for longer. And in my mind, we would drive it until it died and get a new one then. Well, that timeline was accelerated faster when one day I was driving and the car stalled out in the middle of an intersection. And it was probably one of my worst nightmares because I was blocking traffic and the car was in a precarious place and I had all the children with me. So I did what I knew to do, which was to get all the kids out of the car and to the side of the road, and we called the police and the insurance company to come and tow the vehicle out of the road. And the police came, they were amazing, and the people in traffic were actually pretty amazing too. They were just very kind. Nobody was honking at me or doing anything rude. So they towed the vehicle away, and they found out that there was a problem with the battery, so they replaced the battery. But to our surprise, 6 months later, the battery was dead again. And we're like, we just replaced the battery. Why would it be dead again? So long story short, a lot of people looked at the vehicle and they said that there was a electrical problem in the truck, or it wasn't a truck, in the van, that was causing the battery to be overcharged. And there was a risk, they said, albeit small, he said that the overcharging could cause the battery to explode while you're driving. Well, that didn't make me feel safe at all, especially since it was our family vehicle that we drove with the children. So because we didn't have any other options, I continued to drive it for a little while longer. And we started looking at like a vehicle electrician, somebody who could take a look at it and maybe fix the electrical problem. But they informed me that it really wouldn't be worth my effort because as far as I understand it, and this was a couple years ago, so I don't really remember exactly, but I think they told me it was $200 an hour for a vehicle electrician to try to find the short in the vehicle. But they said that with a vehicle like that, it would be like finding a needle in the haystack. And he said you could quickly rack up a really huge bill, and there was no guarantee that they would ever find that electrical problem. He said it could literally be anywhere in the car. He said you probably would be best off just getting something different. So I talked to my husband about buying a new car because I thought, well, this one is 12 years old. Maybe it's time to just get something different. But he looked at our finances and he said that we really couldn't afford a new vehicle at this time. And I really wanted to get a new car because you get the benefit of having the new car warranty and then again drive it for 15 to 20 years until it wears out. But my husband was like, no, there's no way we're going to be able to buy a new car. He said, maybe next year. But to me, driving a car with an electrical issue where the battery might explode at any time wasn't going to work out. So I decided to go to God about it. And I was like praying kind of along the lines of this. Like back before in a different video, I shared about how the Lord had told me that he was reminding me through a woman who I met in the parking lot that the children were his children, and he was only asking me to do the mothering. And if I trusted him to do the providing, he would only ask me to do the mothering. And so I decided to go back to that promise of the Lord. I said, Lord, you told me that you were going to provide for these children that you gave us. You told me that they're your children and that you entrusted them in me to do the mothering. and I'm doing the mothering, Lord, and I want to trust you to do the providing. Now, we need a vehicle because I don't feel safe driving a vehicle with an electrical problem that could stall out or explode. So, Lord, I'm asking you to please intervene on my behalf on this. And I started looking at used vehicles. Certainly wasn't my first choice, but I did find an amazing deal on an Expedition at Echo Park, and it was almost too good to be true. The vehicle was 2 years old, and it was priced below market value. And I immediately jumped on it. I told my husband, who was at work, there's this vehicle priced below market value, and I told him where it was at. And he left work right away to go look at the vehicle. He liked it, so he put a deposit on it, and we ended up buying that. And he said, you know what? This is fine. So we bought that car. It worked out, and the payment was good for us, and I was thankful to have it. But in the back of my mind, I was still a little bummed that I couldn't have waited the extra year to get the car that I wanted. And I know that sounds maybe a little bratty, but I really wanted the new car that I wanted, that I planned to drive for 15 to 20 years versus the used one. So I hope that doesn't sound terrible. So, but this is what God did, and it really goes beyond what I deserve. And that's also pretty amazing how God sometimes goes beyond, well, he always goes beyond what we deserve, because what do we really deserve, honestly? So honestly, we deserve death, right? It's only through Jesus Christ that we have grace and are saved by God's mercy, by his love, right? So he's great, and we are not, right? But we are, he thinks that we're his, he calls us his children, and he thinks we're beautiful. So anyway, as I say, so a year later, the time frame had come where my husband had said that we could have afforded to buy the new car. And I was curious, so I thought, well, let me just see what's out there. So I was looking at the new car that I wanted, and they had an offer on there for 0% financing for 6 years, which is very unusual. I mean, usually they would have 0% for 5 years, but 0% for 6 years, that was like phenomenal. And I mentioned it to my husband. I was like, well, the car that we had bought was a used car, and so it had an interest rate attached to it, because used vehicles usually have higher interest rates than new ones. And I said to him, what if we could get a new car and it's at 0% for 6 years? We might even be able to get the same payment, but have a new car and then get the warranty. And so we decided to go check it out. And the funny thing is that when I went to the Ford dealership and I pulled up in this 2-year-old Expedition, I walked in and they asked me, how can I help you? And I said, well, I was thinking about trading in my vehicle. He looked at it and he kind of chuckled, and he was like, okay. Now, being that I used to be in car sales myself, I know exactly what he was thinking. This lady is underwater, buried in her car. There's no way she's going to be able to trade this in and get a new one without being, trapped in the difference of what it was worth. So he came back with what the truck was worth, and I think he was a little cautious. He slid the paper over, and he's like, this is what we can offer you for your trade-in. Well, to my amazement, the amount that he offered was the exact, within a couple $100 of the amount that we owed on the vehicle. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I don't know the exact numbers, but I remember that they were about the same, again, within $100. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I said, well, I saw on your website that you have 0% for 6 years on Expedition. And he was like, well, no, we don't have 0% on the Expedition. On some of our cars we do, but not the Expedition. And I was like, no, I saw on your website 0% for 6 years for the Expedition. And he was like, he goes, well, if that's the program, he said, it just came out today and I don't know about it. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure it's on there. So he says, okay, hold on a second. So he goes back, I don't know, to the office, and he comes back and he goes, you're right. There is 0% for 6 years on the Expedition. He said, but it's only on this model year, whatever the older model year was that they were phasing out. And he's like, I don't even know if we have any of those. So he looks through his inventory and he says, we have one. We have one of whatever model year that was, that qualified for the 0% for 6 years. And I was like, we'll take it. That's the one. So they ended up taking our old car, and they gave us what the payout was. So that was washed clean. And we were able to get the one expedition that qualified for the 0% for 6 years. And we worked that out to be, it was great that we had, the 0%, but then we also had the brand new car warranty. And the fact that there was one vehicle just kind of made me chuckle on the inside, because I was like, God, that's your plan. I was like, this is the one car. I just felt like it was as if it had my name on it, like he was saving it for me or something. And I was like, God, you are so good. Like, I don't deserve this. Here I am feeling like a whiny brat, like, oh, I got a used car. I really wanted a new one. And I'd waited, 12 years driving this old vehicle, and I really wanted to get a new one, and whine. And, thankfully God loves us even when we act like that or think like that. And if we're honest with what we're really thinking, and unfortunately, it's not always pretty. But God blessed me beyond what I deserve, and we were able to take that car home. And the other blessing I want to point out is that the electrical problem in the Expedition, or in the Dodge Caravan, the electrical problem in the Dodge Caravan is what ended up initiating us getting rid of it, or else we would have kept driving it. But fast forward to the future, when I was in my car accident, it was in the Expedition. And if I was in that car accident in the Dodge Caravan, I probably would have been killed, because the Expedition had a higher crash test rating on the side impact. And not only that, the Expedition sat taller, and the Expedition was hit by a Dodge Ram. And so the Dodge Ram and the Expedition were equal sized vehicles. But if I was in the Caravan and that accident had happened, it would have probably killed me and possibly one or both of my children that were in the car with me. So the Lord knew that, and actually the electrical problem, which initially looked like, why is this happening this year and not next year, ended up being a blessing, because I was in the Expedition when I was in the accident, and my life was spared, and I walked away with no injuries, and that's a miracle. So again, another faith story about how sometimes it looks dark, but God is working. So keep trusting. And I appreciate all your comments. I've seen people sharing, especially on the house video from the other day, people sharing about how that blessed them. And I just want to say, you guys bless me. Like, when I see those comments, I initially started this because I thought I want to help people, but I feel like you guys are helping me, and what a blessing that is. So I want to thank you all for your prayers and your support, and for sharing your stories, because when you share your stories, other people can read those, and then they can be blessed by your comment. So I love that. So I hope to see you all tomorrow, and enjoy this beautiful September, and see you the next day.